Right. So if we are dealing with any type of inflammation, that's swelling. And does your cranium actually move? Yes? No? This would be another one of them aspects on having a general knowledge of the skull and cranium would probably have helped. But do you think your cranium, your entire upper portion of your head, this is your skull, but your cranium is only in this top portion. So does your cranium move, do you think? The scalp does. Oh, I didn't I ask if the cranium moves? Oh, I meant to ask, does the cranium move? No, but
What do you mean, like the outside of your head?
yes, the outside of your head. Okay. So on the inside, yes, your brain can float around in that fluid. But if there's any type of inflammation, like you said, if there's swelling, is there any room for that brain in that cerebral spinal fluid to move? The answer is no. So that's what the main thing that we're looking for. I guess I would find it hard to believe it leaks into muscles. That's why I circled a couple of years on that. Then also, probably, and we've talked about this before, the most important portion of your brain is your brain stem. And it's not like your cerebral cortex is not important, but it's just the idea if you cannot survive without your brain stem because of the vital functions that it performs, whether it's respiratory rates or cardiac rates or heart rates, any one of those. And I think we tried to write that kind of somewhere in, maybe in the column or circled something and wrote it somewhere on that paper, something to that effect. So that was the reasoning behind that. If you're looking at that thing, why is something like this circled or wrote here or written? That's why. So part one, keep in mind, just like we said last hour, probably 50 to maybe 60% of success in college is sitting there and listening. So if you were listening this last week, is that going to be a guarantee that you're going to do fine? Well, perhaps not, but it's going to be a big part of that. Okay? And dealing with a lot of the distractions that I see. Looks like we're still scouting. I'm guessing that's what we're doing. Now, is there a difference between that and having an electronic device out? Yes, I think so. But does it make that more important? Well, everything's going to be important. That doesn't upset me as much as it would if, say, someone on their phone. Then it's kind of be like, oh, what are we doing here? All right. So with that, is there anything you want to ask about part two? And yes, you get to use this on part two. Because like the example we gave is the idea that, and Mr. J told me this, that working with some plumbers that reached inside of a pipe, probably about 5 inches in diameter, pulled out, there's a skunk in there. And everyone just ran in different directions except one guy. Just kind of just watched the skunk walk on out of the area. But would that be frightening for you? And we'll just use for argument's sake that it would be. All right? Because I don't think anyone wants to be sprayed by these animals. So according to this, there's certain things that's going to happen for you to, A, get out of the way, and part of your response is what's actually happening on the inside. All right? So which part of this is going to get you to move from point A to point B? Your autonomic or somatic? Yes. I was going to say, that's not the autonomic, because that is what I said first, but the first one on the paper. That's what I thought you meant, and that is correct. And why are you right?
I remember you saying it was like a cause and effect.
Yes, because what we see happening here, a stimulus can be something that you see, can be something that you hear, something that you smell. All right, so in this case, we see this stimulus, something that you see. Okay, so that's going to go through your afferent division. Just think of, don't say going away. I don't think that's a very good way of looking at it. Looking at it afferent or ascending. Okay, if you ascend to the next level, like you did in volleyball, that means you are going up. Okay, so that means this ascension of this stimulus is going towards the central computer here. And then what's going to happen is, oh my God, that is a skunk. So now, shoots out, sends a response or an effect in the efferent division. And it's going to say, get the heck out of there. So then you jet or motor on out of there. That's your skeletal muscles. That's what's happening on this side. Okay? And I would be led to believe that that would probably startle you. Okay? So physiologically speaking, this is anatomically speaking, because your muscles are moving. Physiologically speaking, now we're over on the autonomic side. What would be happening there? We see a type of stimulus going up. Okay? Some of these visceral and special receptors, that could be your eyes sending something to your brain, and then it's going to say, holy crap, we need to get out of here in a hurry. So then an outgoing response that you have no control over, I think it's this one, I'm trying to read through the paper. So of the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, don't get the SNS, or sympathetic nervous system, mixed up with the somatic nervous system over here. Because what does this SNS do, or sympathetic nervous system? The fight or flight response, which means that outgoing response is causing your heart rate to do what? Go up. Your respiratory rate is going to do what? Go up. And sometimes they say sweating. And I don't think you really notice that. Maybe a person does. But and sometimes when the football team was getting ready to leave for Selby or whatever, I saw Chandler out there. I said, Chandler, I can't pick on you anymore because you were such a great example. And it used to be say, well, this is when your parents were growing up, and probably when I was growing up, if you wanted to perhaps go out on a date or something, usually it was the guy's responsibility to do the asking. Is that the case now? Maybe it should be, but heck, if you want to go out with someone, do you stand there and wait, or do you take initiative? Now, you can answer that yourself, because I don't need to know that. It's none of my business. But the reason I bring Chandler up, it was such a classic example. Just think how it is for guys. You know, you got this. Okay, this friend of mine gave me her phone number. So now I'm going to dial it up. Then you have to hit that pesky red. It's green now because I don't have anybody's phone number in there. You got to hit that green number, or, oh, I'm sorry, red hangs it up, doesn't it? I got to hit that pesky green button here so it actually calls them up. But if it's not that, well, then it's boop, 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 and then you hit the arrow, send them a text. But do I send it? Do I not? Maybe our hands are shaking because we're nervous, or if we're talking on the phone, we're nervous. Maybe this does or doesn't sound familiar. That's neither here nor there. But that can also have an effect. Why our heart rate is going up? Because they're nervous. Maybe a little bit nervous, so they're breathing a little more heavily. Not shallow, but a little deeper in certain cases. So sometimes nervousness can cause that as well. Oh, as far as what we said earlier, we're not going to have a separate section that's saying list these, okay? Because the questions that we asked, you might want to do this on a separate side just so you can answer some of the questions that we had said. For instance, how many cranial nerves start with an A? Which one's the first one? The abducens, because the accessory is number 11. Okay? And I don't know if you asked it, but we answered it for yourself. The facial nerve, is that responsible for sensory functions or motor functions? Are you sure? Yes, it does. So the facial nerve does something like that it's a mixed nerve. And it's one where I got stabbed again. Oh, that wasn't long and drug out, was it? No. No one caught that, did they?
I don't think anybody really notices except you and your wife.
Okay, yeah, it's a work in progress. That's another thing I can probably maybe fail at. I don't know. Like when she complains about something, I wasn't really listening. Yeah. Maybe yes, maybe no. All right. So one of the things we said, the first three, know those functions, okay? The facial nerve, which we just talked about. And what about the glossopharyngeal, do you think? Because where's your pharynx? In the back of your mouth, so that's probably swallowing. So would that be sensory or motor? That would certainly be a motor nerve, okay? And then finally the vagus nerve, we said that's the 10th one, and it gets its name because it wanders through the chest and abdominal cavity. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Braden. And 5 minutes later after you asked it, I don't know if it answers. We don't mean to go off on those long worded tangents, but chances are you probably know what they are already because we have spent enough time on them.
We all need to know for tomorrow.
Okay, your vocabulary, and then work on those listening skills like we had said. How many different types of cells did we talk about? Like, which one of the following is not one that we have talked about in class? Is it a leukocyte, an oligodendrocyte, an astrocyte, or a Schwann cell? Which was what? An leukocyte, because that's a white blood cell. That has nothing to do with the nervous system. All right, so it's questions like that that we have discussed.
And then
Friday we call part 2. That is where you need to list all those cranial nerves in order. And then you don't have to know whether they're sensory, motor, or mixed. That's just general questions we just talked about with that of the facial nerve. And you can use that chart to answer a question dealing with how the body deals with different types of stressors.
So, which cells are in the brain?
The central nervous system is oligodendrocytes that produces what? Myelin. There's another type of cell that produces myelin, but it's not in the central nervous system. It's in the peripheral nervous system. Those are Schwann cells. And that's something that you wrote out on chapter 10 that was handed back to you yesterday.
So
All right.
will there be like essay questions like the packets that we got?
Yes. Especially, is that something you feel you need to go over?
Yeah.
All right. And probably, I wouldn't say probably, but the most important one, okay, would be okay. Oh boy. My spelling is, maybe it's just deal with how it sounds. Okay. Could be catastrophic. But does it mean that having a type of brain trauma is going to be life-threatening? Okay, so we're starting to answer that question before we already asked it, which is good. All right. Wait a minute. Explain. That would be better. I don't want to say if it is worse or, okay, is, yeah, more life-threatening, I guess. Now, the cortex is a pretty vague term. Why would that be? You can make it as specific as you want. What do we mean by cortex? Yeah, because you have two of them, a left and a right side. Knowing what the functions of each one of these is will help you answer that question. Because as far as this is concerned, we'll say it's got two vital life functions, the medulla. The cortex, we said, has how many functions?
4.
And can we deal with those 4?
Yeah.
Yes, it might take a little bit of time, but you can go on with your life with damage to this. Okay. So pick one. Cortex or medulla? Okay. So for instance, if there is damage to the medulla, actually I think there's 2 L's. There's damage to the medulla, what can possibly happen? Well, you can die because what's going to stop? Not necessarily just the brain. Oh, maybe that's what you said. I just didn't think that's what you said. Okay. If there's damage to the medulla, the heart. Now, this is always a trick question on answer that. The heart and the lungs can stop. Your lungs technically don't stop. It's because of something else that causes them to stop. It's something that separates the abdominal and thoracic cavities. You're going to hit yourself in the head when you say, I knew that. Are lungs muscles? No, they are tissues. So there must be something that causes the lungs to move. Yes. So the heart can stop and the diaphragm can stop because remember, the lungs are not muscular tissue. They move because of the diaphragm. I think there's a silent G in here, isn't there? Yeah. Diaphragm. Yeah, that's not how you spell it or pronounce it, but you get the idea. So just think if you were a sniper, and there's lots of recorded cases for this, and if you want to save some of your, if you want to call them your buddies or people in your unit, where you have I wouldn't say an intruder, but a member of the Taliban or something like that, that's possibly a terrorist, and if they're about ready to push a button, okay, where would be the perfect kill shot? And not that we're promoting that, but these are real life events that probably have been documented over in the Middle East, where snipers would take out some of these Taliban members because they're going to possibly blow up members in their unit or other personnel. Would you want to shoot them here or through there? Through the mouth. That's right. Okay, because what will happen is does anyone know or understand what that cavitation effect is with a bullet? What happens when we talk about that cavitation effect, when that round goes through, whether it's a deer, a mountain lion, whatever, what does that bullet do? It will expand. In other words, the entry wound might be about like this on a deer, and especially if it's a hollow point round, the backside where it goes through or exits, probably going to be about like this. Okay? So what happens is when you actually have that go through the brainstem, any function or any type of transmission is not going to get through. You'd shoot them up here, they can still have an autonomic or a reflex to press that button. So you'd want to have damage to that take place. Okay, so now the heart and diaphragm can stop, which means respiration and circulation would stop. And of course, that's going to be life-threatening. Then finally, to the cortex may result in what? It's going to be losses, but these types of losses you can deal with. You can't deal with your heart not pumping. You can't deal with your diaphragm not working. What can you lose? Okay? You say motor function or coordination would be fine. And finally, may have, what would be a better way of saying may have sadness? You won't have joy. May sadness or anger or maybe even disgust, I don't know. So those are all examples of what? I would say we'll go like this. Altered emotions. And believe it or not, there are probably mammals that aren't even human. Well, of course, I don't consider us as mammals. Can canines pick up on this?
Yes.
Oddly enough, yes. And probably even equine cats, I don't know, they're maybe a little different. But yes, oddly enough, dogs can probably read different types of emotions on that of humans. And if you've ever come home and maybe your dog has done something they're not supposed to, does this sound familiar? Do you glare at them or anything? No one's ever been angry at their dog, if you've got one. Or even it could be your voice, and you say, yeah, they can actually pick up on that because they can tell, ooh, they're not very happy with me. All right.
Can we get bonus questions? Please?
Like, who would even do them? That means you got to write them down. That sounds like too much work.
I already got my pen and pencil.
Oh, okay.
It's a picture of this. Okay. And it says, I don't care which side you're on, it says all of us today. It has that, right? And I liked it. And he said, like the thing, keep it up.
Yep. Quicker we get started, the quicker we get done. Yeah. Because otherwise, maybe we don't get bonus questions. I had to hit myself in the head. Now I can do that because I'm angry. I got damage to my cortex. Did you just roll your eyes?
Not to make my
Okay, fair enough. It should be capitalized. I can write that. I was going to put SC. Okay. What I want to say, the Electoral College couldn't have been finished or finalized because back in 2000, between then candidates Al Gore and George W. I almost said H.W. George W. Bush had to have their results argued in front of the Supreme Court. So which U.S. state was that? Now remember, if you choose to do these, if they have to be written on the paper and they have to be turned in tomorrow. There's none of these where you just turn the answer in or write them down on there. That's just part of being responsible. All right. So on the campus of SDSU, you could walk through blank garden or gardens. I don't know if that's what it says, but I think it's gardens. It's got a very specific name. And the only reason I say that it's on the campus is because as you get off the interstate, you're going west on that whatever avenue that is, and then they've got that rock wall that says South Dakota State University, but I don't know if it has the name of that there, but it cannot be mistaken. And just to make sure, I'm going to do that, the letter M. Some of you might have already known what that was. All right, that is all we got. We will catch up to you next time.